Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Verenia, and in today's video I want to talk about some of the best ways to spend money on groceries. Now, as a quick disclaimer, I should note that I am not a dietitian at all, and I'm not telling you how you should be spending your money on groceries. However, the reason why I wanted to do this video is because obviously around the world food prices have been going up, and so it is becoming a bit more expensive to spend money on food. And so what I want to do is just share some of my tips that have helped me save money on food, and hopefully it can help you out too. Plus, if you follow me on Instagram, then you would know that sometimes I do tend to share our food shop for the week, and at times I will get messages asking me how I've been able to keep the food costs so low and how we're still able to eat quite well even though we maybe don't spend as much as other people when it comes to food. Plus, if you're watching this on Tuesday the 29th of March, then you may know that I'm also going to be doing a live training today which is really focused on my 3-step method to actually saving even more money. So make sure you do join us today if you haven't already, and you can also get access to the recording if you do sign up. So I'll link more information up here for you and in the description below, and I can't wait to see you there. So when it comes to actually spending money on groceries, before we even hit the supermarket, one big thing that I like to do is first plan out our meals. And particularly if you're really trying to save money or you realize that the food costs are increasing slightly, what I try to also do is actually plan out meals that can be batched. And what I mean by this is that there are going to be some meals where I will specifically want to make a big portion, and it's going to allow me to do that. So for example, it could be things like stews or curries where you're able to make actually quite a big batch, and I will purposely do that because what it means is that I'm not just making the dinner for today, but I'm also using that to make dinner for other future days as well. Now, the reason why I like doing this is not only is it going to last me longer than just one dinner, but also depending on the type of meal that you're making, you can potentially mix it up if you get bored. And particularly in my case, my husband does not like to eat the same thing every single day, whereas I honestly don't mind. However, what I like to do is almost compromise with that. So let's say for example I'm making stew. Well, you can have that stew with different things. For example, you could maybe have it with potatoes, or maybe you could have it with rice, or maybe you could potentially have it with like pasta or spaghetti. So what I'll be doing is thinking about things that I can actually make in quite a big batch, but to make sure there's still variety, the thing that I make is also going to be compatible with different carbs. Likewise, in our households we do eat chicken, and so for us, when it comes to making chicken, you can pretty much have it with everything. One time you might want to have it with some potatoes, you can have it with rice and make fried rice or something. So for me, when I'm thinking about our meals in advance, if we're actually trying to save money but we still want to be able to enjoy the meals, I like to be a bit creative and see if I can batch everything, but then also be creative with how I actually make the rest of the food later. Okay, so as an example, let me show you some of the type of meals that we may make once in a while if you want to make like a big batch. So for example, this is a stew that I made. So this is literally a prawn stew, which will probably cover us for 2 or 3 meals. I didn't freeze it this time because I think we'll probably end up eating it this week. But sometimes if I do make quite a big batch, what I will make is 2 bowls. And so one of them will go in the fridge so that we can eat it during the week, but another I will then freeze it and we can eat it for another week. Another thing is jollof rice. So my husband actually made this. I'm very proud of him. And so we actually ended up freezing it. So as you can see, there's actually quite a lot. We are currently defrosting it because we're going to have it for the rest of this week. But this was in the freezer. Don't mind the ice cream bowl. But we'd already frozen this because we made such a big batch, and so it means that we can actually have it for another week. Now, if you do want to see an example of how I've been able to do this practically, I do have a video where I did an Aldi grocery haul, and I literally took you guys behind the scene in terms of our food shop, but also how I ended up making the meals at the end as well. So make sure you check that out if you haven't already. I will of course link that up here for you and in the description below. So if you're ever thinking about saving money or even saving time as well, then planning out your meals in advance and actually creating meals that can be batched can be really useful. And if you're liking this video so far, then feel free to give me a thumbs up, as it really does help to support the channel. Plus, I'm sure you know it's free. Now, the next best way that I found to spend money on groceries is actually focusing on buying frozen food when you can. Now, obviously this is going to depend on the food itself, but what I've tried to do, especially in our food shop, is to either buy frozen food or I may actually freeze the food myself. So for example, particularly when it comes to things like fruits, I used to buy fresh blueberries, but I found that sometimes I would get to the end of the week and the blueberries would already be off, and so I would have to get rid of them, meaning that I would essentially have to waste food. But there was a time where I think it was actually actually a subscriber who commented on my videos who said that she actually buys frozen blueberries because she wants to avoid that particular problem. And so I kind of thought to myself, why don't I try to buy frozen blueberries? And even though they were slightly more expensive, I realized that number one, there are actually more blueberries in the pack, but then also number two, of course, because it was frozen, it wasn't going to go off. And so I would be able to buy those frozen blueberries knowing that I didn't have to worry about things going off at all. And at the same time, if there are any things that I can freeze, I will also do it. So for example, in my case, I tend to have a lot of smoothies because I realized that I don't tend to eat a lot of my 5 a day unless I have a smoothie. And so because that's incorporated in my lifestyle, what I will actually do is freeze things like my bananas. I will also even freeze things like spinach to make sure that I don't end up wasting it, and so it's going to last me for a very long time. So if I go into my freezer, then here's what you will see. So this is an example of frozen blueberries. So you can see there's actually quite a lot in the pack, and what that means is I will just put it into my smoothies, and so I'm less likely to waste it because it's frozen already. And these are just an example of bananas. So what I will do is I will just cut them up into pieces, pop them in a freezer bag and just put them in the freezer. So it means that I don't waste any bananas. And also I find that frozen bananas are so much nicer when it comes to smoothies as well. So that's a little top tip for you guys if you like making smoothies. Likewise, with my specific previous point when I was talking about batch cooking, but cooking meals that actually have big portions, I will also freeze some of that as well so that we can actually use that meal for another week. And so what that means is, number one, I have one less meal to cook during the week sometimes, but also we end up saving money because it means that we have one less meal to cook during the week. So if you're ever conscious about how much you might be spending on food, it's worth actually looking at the food and seeing if there's anything that you could potentially freeze, because what that means is that number one, you'll at least be able to waste less food, and potentially you'll also be able to save more too. Now, the next best way you can potentially spend money on groceries and save at the same time is by actually writing down your food items on a list. Now, this is definitely something I've mentioned before in some of my previous videos, but it's actually really important, especially if you do want to keep to your budget. Now, before I go on, some of you may be thinking, Auntie V, I don't want to have a list. That means you're stopping me from buying what I want. No, okay, when it comes to writing a list or even having a budget, I see this as such a big misconception. Just because you may be writing out a list or even having a budget does not stop you from actually buying what you want. The only thing is that you're just taking it into consideration. So rather than just going to the shop and buying everything on the whim, you're essentially just planning for it. So for example, in our case, let's say that we actually want to buy some desserts or we want to buy sweets, then all we will do is just put it on the list so that it's at least accounted for. Now, obviously, when you do write your list, you may go to the store and find out that there are some things that you would actually like to have but aren't on the list, and that's okay. But at least most of your items will be on the list, so you will have a good idea in terms of what you need to buy. And writing out a list is especially going to help you if you've actually planned out your meals, because what you're going to be doing is just identifying the ingredients you will need to then make those meals. Plus, if you're maybe in a situation where you don't actually have much money to spend on food, well, having a list is going to be really important, because that's going to give you the opportunity to then figure out what you actually need versus what you might like to have. And so you'll be able to prioritize what you need first, and then after that, if you obviously have some money left over, you can then start thinking about any other discretionary stuff that you can have. But it might be a bit difficult to know that if you haven't necessarily written down what you need. Again, having a list isn't there to restrict you. All it's doing is just helping you plan out your money in advance. And if you want to learn more about other grocery hacks that you can potentially make, I do have a video that talks about that in a bit more detail, so make sure you check it out if you haven't already. I will link it up here for you and in the description below. Now, another great way you could potentially spend money on groceries is actually having a look at what you currently have at home. Now, what I mean by this is sometimes we end up buying things that we don't necessarily need to buy because we may already have this at home. And I will 100% tell you that I am also guilty of this too. So for example, in our case, we used to buy a lot of bell peppers because I will pretty much use bell peppers for everything. But sometimes what would happen is that we would go to the shops knowing that we just need bell peppers, or thinking that we need bell peppers, without actually remembering that we already had some bell peppers still in the fridge that needed to be used. most. And obviously what that meant was there were times where we wouldn't actually need to buy any bell peppers whatsoever because we had enough in the fridge. And so because there was no point in buying those bell peppers, we could essentially have just saved money by not buying the bell peppers because we already had that at home. So one thing that I like to do, and I've been doing this a lot more now, is whenever I'm writing a list in terms of things that we need, I will actually get up and I will go to the cupboard or the fridge and actually check what we have so that I can make sure that we're just buying things that we genuinely need. And so if there's anything that has actually run out, then we will go and buy it. And honestly, it does not even take a long time to do that. So I have no idea why I wasn't doing it in the first place. I don't know if it was just laziness, but it's now something that I try to do a lot more often. One other tip that I would also give is if you find that you have certain ingredients but you don't really know what to do with it, let's say that you've just got some potatoes sitting there and you haven't really planned anything with it, well, what I like to do is literally just go on Google and type in recipes. So sometimes I will go on Google and I will type in sweet potato recipes, or what can I do with rice? And by looking at those recipes, you may be surprised at what you find. And if you do decide to try them, you may actually really like them and decide to do them in the future. So I'm not gonna lie to you, Google can be your best friend. Now, if you realize that you may need further support when it comes to overspending, not just on food, but in other areas as well, then definitely check out my one-to-one coaching program, because essentially what I will do is help you to overcome the overspending without completely restricting you, where you can still save money, but you can also spend your money freely too. So make sure you check that out if you haven't already. You can book a free interest call with me. So I'll link more information up here for you and in the description below. But the one thing I will say is you will be surprised at some of the ingredients you have in your own home. So try and take a look and be creative. So if you did like this video, then please do give me a thumbs up if you haven't already. And let me know in the comments, what are your other best ways to spend money on groceries? I do post every Tuesday and Friday. So if you would like to know more, then of course you can subscribe to my channel. Plus remember, I am doing a free training if you are watching this on Tuesday the 29th of March. So I can't wait to see you there. If not, I will see you guys on Friday.